Good evening, listeners. I welcome you to this evening session of teleconferencing being conducted by the Faculty of Political Science from the IGNOU headquarters. I am Professor Anurag Joshi. With me is my colleague Dr. S. Vijay Shekhar Reddy, who is our expert for the present session. The topic for our discussion today is South Asia as a region. Now, those of you who are enrolled in IGNOU's bachelor's degree program from the discipline of political science, you'll recollect that we have a course that is EPS 15, which is South Asia Economy, Society and Polity. This course went on offer to students about a little over 3 years ago and is actually a new version of the earlier course, which was EPS 5. The course is divided into 10 blocks, and the topic that we have chosen today is in nature and scope such that we'll be able to cover quite a few of the vital issues that have been dealt with in the 10 blocks of the course. South Asia as a region is a theme which falls essentially in what we call area studies in social sciences. Some of you may be familiar with the concept of area studies. For instance, South Asia is one area or region. Then you have, say, the Middle East, you have West Asia, you have Southwest Asia, Far East, Asia Pacific, so on and so forth. In the domain of area studies, then we concentrate on what are the commonalities of the different countries that constitute a region, what are the differences among them, and so on. Now, South Asia as a region naturally has its own specificities, it has its own peculiarities. The countries which constitute South Asia, they have some similarities among themselves, as well as there are vital differences among the countries which constitute this region. So in our discussion today, we would be focusing on some of the common features of South Asia as a region, then its evolution as a region, its recent contemporary history, some of the vital issues that are being faced by the various countries that constitute this region, in which direction the countries are moving forward, what is holding back the countries, the new economic trends and strains. For instance, we all know that globalization is very much there, so what is the scenario regarding globalization in South Asia? Then when you talk of South Asia, regional cooperation also very much comes into focus. Then two of the major nation states of South Asia, India and Pakistan, as most of you must be knowing, they are now openly nuclear weapon states. So what has these implications for the security dynamics of the region. These are the issues that we would try to cover in the 45 minutes that we have. I would just to refresh your memory point out that South Asia as a region consists of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Nepal and Bhutan, and of course there have been controversies and debates associated as to what countries really constitute South Asia as a region. I would request my colleague Vijay to throw some light on this to set the discussion rolling.
Thank you, Anurag. As you pointed out, South Asia region has some specificities which are different from others. But let us begin with answering the question, what is a region? What constitutes a region? Is South Asia a region? Because many observers of South Asia, having seen the slow pace of regional cooperation in South Asia, as well as the differences between the countries, whether they are in strategic or in political realms, have said, is this really a region? But if we see that a region, if it is defined as a cluster of geographically proximate countries with shared common history and culture and even social identities, and also sharing some common desire to cooperate. These are all the traits which are visible in within the region. So there is no doubt about the regionness of South Asia. Only thing is, there are certain features of the region which make progress in a regional level somewhat slow and halting. What are the specific features of the region? I think here I would identify three specific regions which are peculiar to South Asia. One feature is that the region is inherently Indo-centric. That is, countries of South Asia do not share border with each other except with India or through India. This is very important characteristic of the region. That is, India is located right in the center and all the other countries of the region are in its periphery. So this has its own advantages and also disadvantages, as you will see in the program as we unfold the region. A second important characteristic of the region is that in South Asia there is a great asymmetry of power and resources. India, because of its geographical size, economy, technological prowess, dominates the region, and all the other countries of the region are far behind in these resources. So the second important characteristic then is the asymmetry of the region. And the third important characteristic is that, as I said, all the countries share border with India or and not with each other. And this border is highly porous, which means that people, ideas and goods travel across these borders freely. In fact, there are matrimonial alliances taking place across countries in several parts, in almost all the countries of the region. These are the three features of the region which shape its political dynamics as well as their economic development trajectories. Anurag, this is, I think, the essential features.
Vijay, thank you. You have, I think, presented quite lucidly the features that go into making South Asia what it is. I wanted to ask you, like we were discussing in the afternoon also today while discussing this topic, is there an established consensus on which countries constitute South Asia? Because as far as I know, there have been debates in the past that Afghanistan should also be a part of South Asia, or Pakistan should be taken out of South Asia. Can you throw some light on this?
Yes, Anurag. This is also very important because when the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation came into being in 1985, at that time there was a debate what should constitute a region, which are the countries to be included in the region, and then the question of Afghanistan and Myanmar came up.
Okay.
So, however, because large number of interaction was with these among the 7 countries, Afghanistan and Myanmar were excluded and from the region, and much of the deliberation towards the cooperative movement took place among the 7 countries. But as you know, that last year Afghanistan has been admitted into the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, and in future we will not be surprised if Myanmar is also becoming a member of the SAARC. Now, before I would also like to clarify about the term South Asia itself. You have rightly pointed out the debates that occur on the coinage of the term. You see, the term South Asia is essentially a colonial legacy. That is, till independence, that is till 1947, it is the Indian subcontinent, that the term which was applicable to all the countries of this region, the Indian subcontinent. But with the partition, there were objections from a few countries saying that it's no longer an Indian subcontinent, so a better term would be South Asia. And the term South Asia became popular and was popularized by the American university programs which focused on area studies, which particularly South Asia. As a result, the term South Asia has acquired wider popularity, and this was reinforced again in 1971 when Bangladesh emerged as an independent state, because Bangladesh is within the region which was earlier defined as South Asia, and this idea got further strengthened. But when we debate issues like strategic affairs, it is always not easy to limit ourselves to South Asia region, and often strategic analysis talk about use the term Southern Asia as an alternative term, by which they include China also within the fold of the region.
But by and large, South Asia is the accepted term.
Is the accepted term for all the 7 countries of the region, and now the 8th country, Afghanistan, and tomorrow even Myanmar may be joining the
okay, so Afghanistan is now a part of South Asia.
It is a part of
accepted.
In the last SAARC summit, it was formally admitted as a member of South Asia, and this is largely because, again, historically, if you see, there are strong cultural and social bonds between Afghanistan and India. And as you know, the edicts of Ashoka, you find them even in Afghanistan. The recently demolished and vandalized Bamiyan Buddhas. They are all symbols of the cultural ties between the region, which earlier was defined as the Indian subcontinent and now as South Asia. This is to be kept in mind.
Okay, Vijay, I think our students would have got an idea of which countries really constitute South Asia as we know it today, and how this came about. Carrying on the discussion further, I think we can spend some time on the recent history of South Asia. It will set the tone for carrying the discussion forward. South Asia, the countries which are there, the recent contemporary history is basically that of the arrival of different colonialist, different imperialist powers which came over to this part of the world in search of, as a common saying is, gold, glory and God. I do not know how correct it is, but that's one popular way of putting it. And the recent contemporary history is then really dealing with the arrival of the various Western powers who were engaged in a perpetual struggle with each other over acquisition of territories, for acquiring resources to support the nascent capitalism, industrialism that was coming about in those countries. One interesting feature here is that some of the countries which constitute South Asia, they more or less remained free from colonial intervention. For instance, Bhutan. Bhutan, as far as one knows, largely was untouched by the colonial experience, and partly for this reason it charted a history, a destiny that was quite different from the other countries of the region. Vijay, I would like you to dwell a bit on this.
You are right, Anurag, because colonial experience has not been uniform throughout the region. Okay. Especially Nepal and Bhutan, for instance, which were until recently called as the Himalayan kingdoms, have come under the political influence of the British, but they were never directly annexed. They remained as a dominions of the British. Mm-hmm. The British had considerable influence, but because of strategic reasons, largely because they wanted these two countries as buffers between India and China. Mm-hmm. So they did not extend their direct control over these two Himalayan kingdoms. So as you rightly said, this also lends a distinct characteristic to the region and the countries of these two countries especially, because these two are the only countries which remained kingdoms, and though Nepal is now marching towards a parliamentary system, Bhutan is still a kingdom, and if you see, excluding these two, all other countries have started off as democracies. Yeah. India, Sri Lanka were the earliest ones, and these two countries, India and Sri Lanka, were the ones with more or less stable democracies. Yeah. Though the other countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh, they started off initially as democracies, but very soon there were distortions in their political system.
Since Vijay, you are mentioning about the flourishing, if one can say, of democracy in India and Sri Lanka, I think we can discuss as to why other countries have not been able to establish democracy, whether in procedures or substantively. For instance, neighbor in the West, Pakistan, it has been under military spell for nearly 3 decades. Then Bangladesh, which was formerly East Pakistan, it started off with a democratic regime, and then the army took over, and then since 91, of course, democracy has been there, but how much democratic it is? Why is it that other countries have been, can you take up this issue?
Yes, Anurag, but it is not an easy question to answer also, largely because it is very difficult to pinpoint and say this is the specific reason for the absence or the presence of democratic ethos or institutions in the different countries of the region. First, this is largely because the region, the political boundaries of the states are essentially legacies of the colonialism. The modern state structure as they came, the formation of Bangladesh, formation of, to begin with, Pakistan, was essentially a colonial construct. And then Nepal today, its border is essentially a colonial construction in the sense that after a series of wars that the present boundary of Nepal got defined in the late 19th century. Sri Lanka, of course, being an island, it has remained intact in its original shape. Bhutan also again is again a region which with not clearly defined borders, and with China often making claims over territories in Bhutan. So the region is, the political map has been drawn on a region which is again culturally and socially sharing some common features and identities. So when political boundaries are drawn on such regions, then there are bound to be certain gaps, because people across the boundaries are one and the same.
Yeah.
And it is the political boundaries that separates and some of the ties between them. Then second thing is, during the colonial period, another important aspect of this imperialist rule was that only those regions which were considered profitable or which were considered suitable for economic plunder, these regions were developed. If you see the entire Indian subcontinent, why are the railways only in certain areas? Why were the certain ports developed? It is largely because of the economic interests of the colonial power. So when this happens, only certain areas get developed, and the so-called marginalized or peripheral regions get marginalized. As a result, there is great inequality. Pakistan and Bangladesh, for example, they belong to this region which can be described as periphery, the areas which have been completely neglected during the British colonial rule. So it is in this background we have to examine why democracy has succeeded or failed in this thing. One of the important features of all the countries in the region, let us begin with that. The common feature is that almost all the countries are multicultural. There are plural societies. They are essentially pluralistic, with different religions and ethnic groups living there. It is because of multi-ethnicity, then again the political dynamics has evolved in such a way that almost all the states have fallen victim to sectarian politics. And even India and Sri Lanka, which have experienced more or less stable democracies, even they have become victims of fallen prey to the sectarian politics and all that. Why is it so? It will be very difficult to pinpoint, but general characteristics one can identify. See, in these two democracies, Sri Lanka, when in the 1950s the assertion of Sinhala Buddhism took place, or in India when the demolition of the Babri Masjid and the assertion of fundamentalist forces occurred in the 90s. These two demonstrate that we have not been able to successfully bind all the different social communities within our country. And why did this occur? It is essentially because of the competitive politics taking place with between the different multi-party system which is prevailing here. Whereas in other countries of the region, they also experienced this sectarian politics. Bhutan, for instance, in 1980s introduced the uniform Drukpa Buddhist culture, and this was resented by many minorities, including the Nepalis who were settled there in Bhutan. And Pakistan, of course, it essentially began as a Muslim majority but secular state, soon became an Islamic state by the end of the 50s. And similarly, Bangladesh, it also fell prey to sectarian politics very soon, and with the result, the Chakmas and few other minorities, they resented and they got alienated from the Bangladeshi political process for a very long time. So, why did this occur in these countries? I mean, these four countries which are not truly democratic, because Pakistan was under military rule in the late 50s, and an autocratic kind of a system prevailed in Bangladesh when the constitution was amended in 1974, just as soon after it became independent, which converted the parliamentary system into a presidential system. And in the two Himalayan kingdoms, with the monarchy holding a strong reins, it is the authoritarian politics which dominated, and it is this authoritarian tendencies that promoted or strengthened sectarian politics, resulting in the alienation of the minorities in these countries.
So, yeah, I think what I'm gathering is, one, you say that as far as the issue of democracy is concerned, one is the colonial legacy in the sense of imposition of boundaries,
artificial boundaries,
imposition of artificial boundaries. Other, how I think I'll put it is, maybe some of the countries have been not that successful in the task of nation building,
Yes.
Say for instance, not being, as you also pointed out, development has been uneven, so the levels of inequity are higher, and in such an scenario, say an organization which is generally as organized as say the military, it gets a chance for a foothold.
Exactly, Anurag, and this is what has happened in both Pakistan and later in Bangladesh, because these are the two reasons, as I said, economically neglected hinterlands during the British colonial rule, and when they became were established as separate states, Pakistan never, that region never had democratic roots.
Yeah.
Though in
ethos, I think that also matters to an extent.
Yes, and it was the elite which has migrated from India and several parts of India, which went there.
Yeah.
And they encountered a totally different kind of a culture which is peculiar to that region, and they found it difficult to stabilize and arrive at a consensus on what type of political system that they should evolve. So even before the debate on the constitution, what type of constitution they should have, that went on prolonged for a long time, and before it could be resolved, it came under a military rule. And as you know, military rule continued for a very long time, and it was only in the 1990s that for the first time that democracy came into some being in Pakistan.
See, Vijay, I can relate one more issue to this, which you pointed out is one of the major factors when we are studying South Asia, that these countries, they often are able to come together on, this what is called the Big Brother syndrome. That is the what you were talking about, Indo-centric,
Yes.
So can you take up that? Can we discuss that issue a little bit?
Yes.
India's, overwhelming presence in the region, and what are its implications?
Yes. As we began the program by discussing these three essential features of the region.
All I think we cannot cover also. Now we have about 15 minutes.
I see.
Some we can, some major ones we can.
No, these two characteristics, the first two characteristics which I mentioned, the Indo-centric feature of the region, as well as the asymmetry in the region, means that the relations between the countries of the region are essentially bilateral. That is, each country has a relationship with the other, especially unavoidably with India. Because India shares border with almost all the countries of the region. So the relations tend to be bilateral, and bringing in regional aspects become very difficult. And second important thing is all the other countries of the region other than India are very small in terms of resources, whatever resources, be it whether it is economic, scientific and technological, or even the geographical expanse. So as a result, they feel, smaller countries feel threatened. As the word big brother syndrome which you used is something which correctly describes the relationship between the small countries and a big brother who is around. So they all feel threatened, but India, though despite its repeated and appeals and demonstrating that it is not an expansionist power, still the suspicion lurks among these countries.
Which I think brings us to another, I think it's an important issue, Vijay, that is the issue of regional cooperation,
Yes.
Like as we all know, students of political science, fostering, consolidating regional cooperation in South Asia as a region, the institution of SAARC was set up.
Yes.
It's been around for a number of years, but a view is that it has not been, very effective in, say, resolving conflicts which are there between the countries, or say giving a fillip to trade and industry and all. Can you just...
Yeah. Like I told you before, the region itself, because of its Indocentrism and the asymmetry within the region, regional cooperation emerged in a very late stage of the South Asian evolution. It is only in 1979 that Bangladesh slowly proposed the idea of regional cooperation, and India did not show enthusiasm initially, because again that enthusiasm would be misread by the other countries as interest in expanding its influence in the region. So in a very guarded manner India supported, and it took 5 years or 6 years of negotiations between the countries for the South Asian Association to finally materialize into a regional cooperative organization, which we call it as SAARC now. So, see, for nearly 40 years of its life existence, there was no regional cooperative arrangement with the region. In spite of the fact that all the countries shared cultural, social and ties, shared more or less similar economic interests, in the sense that all were developing countries interested in taking up development and nation building efforts. Still, it took such a long time for regional cooperation to emerge, and once it took place, as you rightly said, the progress has not been again satisfactory to the same extent we thought would happen. Like in all other parts of the world, whether it is in Africa, Latin America, or even in Southeast Asia, regional organizations which came into being, they progressed much faster. The economic interaction between the countries have been quite intense, and even if you take today the percentage of trade between countries of ASEAN or among the countries of Latin America, it is much greater than among the countries of South Asia region. Which means that despite the formation of the regional cooperative organization, we were not able to really push our economic development agenda through this organization. It is again the asymmetry of the region and the big fears of the big brother that have come in the way. And in addition to that, of course, some of the countries have pursued alternative strategic policies, in the sense that while India was trying to consolidate its political system and ensuring that outside forces do not interfere in the region, and the region does not fall prey to Cold War politics, some of the countries were interested in embracing the Cold War becoming a close ally of the United States, or sometimes that of China. With the result, so there is a strategic dissonance among the countries of the region. So this also prevented these countries from coming together. Other countries, countries of other regions, they could succeed largely because, like for instance, ASEAN, it was largely a common threat of communism that brought these countries together. And though they did not share the same amount of social cohesion and cultural identities, still these countries managed to build a very strong economic cooperative mechanism in the region, which is not present in our region.
So SAARC is likely to be a showpiece organization.
I would not say that. In spite of these differences, we have made considerable progress in the SAARC.
Yeah, I think that we are doing well on this people-to-people exchange front, I think.
Especially this people-to-people...
NGOs coming, visiting each other.
Exactly. This is some the new development which has begun in the 90s and gained...
what they call parallel track to diplomacy.
Track to diplomacy. What has happened was, in the 90s, many feared that the race between Pakistan and India to acquire missiles and then nuclear weapons, this added a new dimension to the relations between the countries of the region. So there were genuine fears that unless the mistrust between these two countries is removed, that a small war could escalate into
full-fledged nuclear.
And prior to even nuclear weapons, they were feared that it would spur the development of nuclear weapons. For these reasons, what they did was to minimize such possibilities. Confidence-building measures were initiated in the 90s, and these gathered momentum more after both the countries emerged as nuclear weapon states in 1998. So this has to be kept in mind, the reason why track to diplomacy and confidence building measures began to be emphasized. It is around at this time only that globalization had gathered momentum, and with civil society organizations gaining a greater recognition both within the countries and internationally, they also contributed their might to towards confidence building measures.
Vijay, since you are a student of international relations and have some familiarity with security issues, I think when we are discussing South Asia as a region, especially as we have mentioned, you've also mentioned India and Pakistan acquiring nuclear weapons, and there has been a change in the the world pecking order last 10-15 years. USA is the only superpower, and China is next door to India. It's also a big power, How do you view all this? Implications for the region,
See, as I began when we discussed South region and South Asia as a region, I pointed out that there is also a concept called Southern Asia.
Southern, you mentioned.
So within the strategic community, the Indian strategic community particularly would favor using the term Southern Asia rather than South Asia, because when you say South Asia, we talk the focus invariably is between India and Pakistan as nuclear weapon state. It's only when we talk about it as a Southern Asian region, then you bring in China also into the security, because security relations are much more wider as countries develop and their interests expand. Their outlook is much wider. So why did India and go nuclear at that particular juncture? One school of thought says it is a reaction to the already nascent nuclear build-up which has taken place.
Pakistan and China.
That is one thing which occurred in the mid-80s. There is a strategic and nuclear relationship between these two countries, with the result that China transferred important nuclear technology to Pakistan. But more important, India's desire to acquire nuclear weapons began sometime soon after China began to exploded its nuclear weapons in 1964.
Yes.
That was so from there India kept restraining to exercise its nuclear options for a long time, until it became necessary because of both the way the non-proliferation regime was building up around it, and the security was deteriorating, that India had no option but to declare itself as a nuclear weapon state in the 90s. So that's why we hear that during the Congress government in the late 80s, that Rajiv Gandhi almost contemplated exploding a nuclear device, and that in the mid-90s, the P.V. Narasimha Rao regime under the Congress party again tried to go nuclear, and it was finally the NDA government in 1998 which carried the nuclear explosions and declared India to be a nuclear weapon state. But all these are again, as I said, reactions to the closing in of the non-proliferation regime and the tightening of technology controls around it. But for Pakistan, it is precisely because India is acquiring the nuclear weapons that it should have. So this is how it began its nuclear quest in the early 70s. As soon as it was got dismembered and Bangladesh emerged as a sovereign independent state, Pakistan, because of its insecurity, sought nuclear weapons as an equalizer with India. Whereas India's own quest for nuclear weapons began with its the security threats or emanating from China emerging as a nuclear weapon state in 1964. So it is a kind of a chain reaction. And China itself, why did it become nuclear? Because both the superpowers were already nuclear, and they wanted to, were ruling, dominating the world politics. So it is a kind of chain reaction.
It's a big power politics, you mean to say, big power dynamics.
Dynamics of the
to a good extent.
So one can say, you see, to give a simple analogy, if you have a overhead tank with dirty water, you run the tap, you get dirty water only. So it begins at the top, what you have in the tank. So it has to be at the top that things have to be kept in order. Otherwise, the reaction will continue.
I think we have almost reached the end. So I'll just summarize. Students, we discuss South Asia as a region today, which was, one can say, a sort of introduction to BDP elective EPS 15, which is South Asia Economy, Society and Polity. But one interesting point of our discussion today was that apart from South Asia, you have also acquired familiarity with the concept of Southern Asia. We tried to cover some of the concerns that are there in the region. Of course, in the short period of 45 minutes, it's not possible to cover all the issues, but I hope that you would have benefited from our discussion. I thank my colleague Dr. Vijay Shekhar Reddy for his interesting and lucid comments.
Thank you.